What is up, guys? Lonehawk here today, and welcome back to Overwatch. In today's video, we're going to be doing a quick guide on the basics of building a team composition. We're going to split it up into 4 groups, those being the 4 different game modes: Assault, Escort, Control, and Hybrid. We're also going to split it up into offense and defense and talk about some strategies for each. First, let's talk about Assault. This is the game mode where the attacking team has to capture points, and if they capture the first point, the second one is unlocked. The 3 Assault maps in the game currently are Hanamura, Temple of Anubis, and Volskaya Industries. The key features on these Assault maps are their large choke points, so you're going to want to build team comps accordingly to help push through the choke points when you're on the attacking team and stop enemies from pushing when you're on the defending team. When you're on the attacking team, I recommend having 2 tanks, 2 supports, and 2 attackers. For tanks, you need at least one of Reinhardt or D.Va in my opinion. Honestly, you can't go wrong if you have a Reinhardt and a D.Va, however some people like to play Roadhog and Zarya, so as long as you have one of those tanks, you should be good to go. Your other tank can be a slightly greedier tank like Roadhog or Zarya, as I mentioned, as long as you have one of Reinhardt or D.Va. This is because Reinhardt and D.Va both have great pushing power. You can get through choke points much easier when a D.Va puts up her defense matrix or Reinhardt uses his shield and your team funnels behind you properly. For supports, my favorite support setup on pretty much any map is one of Lucio or Mercy and one of Zenyatta or Ana. This is because Lucio and Mercy are both primary healers in my opinion, meaning they can heal a lot and that's their main job. Ana and Zenyatta, however, can also dish out some damage, and they have some utility. So having one of them to complement the healing of your primary healer, as well as add some utility to the team, is very good. Some people like to go Mercy and Lucio. I think this is good too. However, I do think you're going to overlap a little bit. And by that I mean Lucio and Mercy are both going to be fighting to heal, and you're going to get less ult charge total because you have less utility on your team. When you're attacking on Assault maps, I like to use 1 flanker and 1 pusher as my Assault heroes. This means Soldier 76 and McCree can stand behind Reinhardt's shield and deal some major damage without being at too much of a risk. While this is happening, a Genji and or a Tracer can be behind enemy lines distracting the enemy team while you guys push. Another viable option is to have 2 pushers, a McCree and a Soldier 76, that way you guys can just push through the enemy team and not worry about flankers. While it is okay to do 2 pushers, however, it is not okay to do 2 flankers. You really don't want to have a Tracer and a Genji because similar to the supports we mentioned before, they're going to be fighting over the flank, and they're going to be less effective than you would be if you had a pusher and a flanker. Now, there are some exceptions, and in higher level play, I have seen 2 or more flankers used, but you are not at higher level play, most likely. You are probably playing in quick play or competitive, where there is little to no communication on your team, so having 2 flankers isn't going to work as well. When you're defending on Assault maps, your team comp barely changes. You're going to want the same tank setup. 2 tanks, at least one of which being Reinhardt or D.Va. The other really doesn't matter. 2 supports, in my opinion, it should be 1 primary healer and 1 utility support, but where it changes is where you have your damage dealers. When attacking, I said to have 1 pusher and 1 flanker, or 2 pushers. When defending, you don't really need a flanker. I've seen Tracer and Genji used on defense by really good players, however, I really don't recommend it. I recommend having someone who can push, maybe a Soldier 76 and a McCree, because they both have pretty high damage outputs, and 1 defensive hero, like a Junkrat or a Sniper. It doesn't matter really as long as they can hold a choke point. Widowmaker and Junkrat are my 2 personal favorites, but it's really up to you. The strategy is very simple. On offense, you need to get through that choke point because once you're through, the game becomes a lot easier. On defense, you want to hold people at the choke point and watch for flankers, that way you don't get caught off guard. When you're on defense, make sure you never push past the choke point. If you extend too far, the enemy team will come out of spawn and kill you, and you will have left your whole point wide open. Utilize the choke point on every Assault map, and you will win many more games. Honestly, that base team composition we just went over for Assault doesn't really change too much on other game modes. We're going to go over them to talk about some slight changes. However, if you just use that team composition with 2 tanks, 2 supports, and 2 damage dealers, you should be pretty well off. Now let's talk about Escort. Escort is different from Assault because, as you all know, you have to move a payload and defend it as it moves, trying to get it near the enemy team's spawn. The main difference here is that both the attacking team and the defending team can be flanked. Yes, Tracer and Genji and even Pharah are all very useful on this map regardless of if you're on offense or defense. And that is because both sides, both offense and defense, will be doing some offensive and defensive maneuvers in one round. Think of it this way: when you're the attacking team, you have to attack and move on to the payload. Once you're on the payload though, you are now playing defense. You have to sit on the payload and stop enemies from coming near it. When you're on the defending team, that is just reversed. You have to stop enemies from getting on the payload, and if they do manage to get on it, you have to attack and move forward on their position and get on the payload so it stops moving. Now let's talk about what this means for your team composition. For tanks, I still recommend at least one of Reinhardt or D.Va. However, I recommend D.Va a little bit more now. This is because D.Va has a little bit more mobility, and given that you can both be flanked regardless of if you're on the payload, attacking it, defending it, doesn't matter, you can always be flanked, a little bit more mobility is going to help you. And the use of her defense matrix can turn around flanks that the enemy has performed on you. If a Pharah comes up behind you and quickly ults, you can use your defense matrix to hopefully defend your team before they all die. The thing here is, I'm not going to recommend you run both Reinhardt and D.Va. When you have one, I recommend that your other tank is either Roadhog or Zarya, or Winston if you're into that. But the reason for this is because you're going to want someone a little bit greedier. Enemies are going to be moving around a lot and they won't be as bunched, meaning having two people that shield in one direction won't be as useful because the enemy team is likely to be surrounding you. Roadhog and Zarya are both good at defending from all angles. Roadhog can pull individual players out very easily with his hook, and Zarya can win 1v1s and 2v2s with her shield. For your damage dealers, I recommend having, once again, one flanker and one pusher. It's always good to have a pusher near your tank and on the point, that way he can help the tank out whenever he needs to. It's always good to have a flanker because stopping enemies before they can even get to the point is extremely valuable, and if you have someone that can do that, you're going to make your game a lot easier. Two flankers isn't recommended, but it can work if both of your tanks know what they're doing and can get a lot of kills. Let's say your team went Roadhog and Zarya, and they really don't want a D.Va or a Reinhardt. Having two flankers in this situation is pretty good because your tanks can be on the point and taking enemies out while you're behind enemy lines, being a distraction. If you have a Reinhardt and a D.Va, however, two tanks that are both very tanky and passive that don't deal as much damage, I recommend having two pushers, a McCree and a Soldier 76. Both work very well. However, both of these situations with two pushers or two flankers, I don't think are as good as the one flanker and one pusher setup with one tank that has a shield and one tank that goes for a little bit more kills. The difference between offense and defense, as I said before, is pretty small because you're both going to be doing some attacking and some defending at the same time. However, the attacking team tends to group a little bit more than the defending team because they all want to push the payload, and it only takes one defender to stop that payload from being pushed while they stand on it. So this being said, some AoE heroes may be a little bit better on defense than offense. Heroes like Pharah, Junkrat, and even Zarya's alternate fire all come to mind, so using them will be very effective. However, it is not necessary. You can still use standard heroes that I've mentioned before. Now let's talk about the hybrid game mode very briefly before we move on to control. The hybrid game mode is where you start with Assault and end with Escort. The three maps that this happens on are Hollywood, Numbani, and King's Row. Given that this game mode is just a combination of the two game modes we've already talked about, I don't think the team compositions are going to surprise you. At the beginning, when the game is in the assault mode, you want to defend the large choke points that exist on each of these maps. Use a team composition you'd use for assault on both sides, the one I mentioned before. However, if you're the attacking team and you reach the payload and you start pushing it, or you're the defending team and the enemy team has reached the payload, switch your team composition accordingly. Switch to a composition you'd use on payload and not a composition you'd use on assault, because the assault portion of the game is completely over. As I mentioned before, this means maybe go for some slightly greedier tank picks like Roadhog and Zarya, because they can both get kills easier than D.Va and Reinhardt, and depending on what you were running before, switch your assault heroes up. If you were using two pushers to really get through that choke point, you're going to want to switch to at least one flanker, because the payload portion of the map is much wider and more open than the assault portion. Control is kind of different than the other game modes we've mentioned in Overwatch, and this is because there is no attacking and defending team. You're both attacking and you're both trying to capture the same point. This means a few things will change. For one, having 2 flankers now isn't that bad of an idea, because enemies are slightly more scattered in this game mode because they're all attacking the point from different directions, meaning you can hopefully get some easier picks. For tanks, it's hard not to recommend D.Va and Reinhardt because they're both in a very good state right now. However, I think having 2 very greedy tanks like Roadhog and Zarya, and actually Winston in this game mode too, will be very beneficial. This is for 2 reasons. One, they're not completely useless when the enemy attacks from multiple directions. Because of the nature of their shields, Reinhardt and D.Va can only defend their team from one direction. The second reason is that Reinhardt and D.Va both have no range. They have nothing they can really do if enemies are far away. Sure, Reinhardt has his Fire Strike and D.Va has some mobility with her boosters. However, Roadhog, Zarya, and Winston are much better at preventing enemies from getting to the point rather than defending your team while they're on it. They are more proactive tanks. They seek out the enemies to kill them before they get to the point. Reinhardt and D.Va defend the allies and don't really seek out enemies. They're just there to defend the allies that are sitting on the point. In my opinion, these proactive tanks are better because you can kill enemies before they have the time to coordinate an attack and take the point from you. Keep in mind, guys, these are the basics of a team composition. It's much more complicated than this, and I don't have time to go over it all in today's video. Your team composition will change depending on the map, game mode, and the enemy's team composition or your current standing in the game. If you're getting stomped, you're definitely going to want to switch something up, and if you're winning, you really shouldn't. So, with that all being said, hopefully you enjoyed the basics of building a team composition. If you did, be sure to leave a like down below, and maybe check out my video about general counters, where I separate the heroes into different categories than the game puts them in to help you better identify who counters who. Overall, guys, just a quick update for you all if you're a subscriber to my channel. I don't know how many videos I'm going to be able to get out this week. I'm finishing up a giant internship project this and next week, and I'm getting surgery this Wednesday, so, that'll be fun. So I may be a little bit, out of it, a little bit stressed, and I don't know if I'll actually be able to get too many more videos out this week. I'm hoping to get you guys my new setup tour where I put together my new PC that I'm getting this week. I've got lots of nice stuff in that. That'll be a fun video, and maybe an ultimate guide. I'm really trying to get out the next ultimate guide, but those seriously take forever. And with this giant project I'm doing, I'm not sure when I'll be able to get out the next one. If you want these updates more often, just follow me on Twitter at LoneHawk. That's a 0, not an O, because I tweet there like multiple times a day, every day. So if you want to stay in the loop as to what I'm doing, what the status of next videos are, go follow me there on Twitter. There's a link in the description on my channel. And as I said before, hopefully you all enjoyed. I will see you guys all later. LoneHawk out.